Welcome one and all to the Daily Freedomist Show. This is your host, Paul Gordon Collier, coming at you from Freedomist.com. Today's date is Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. Today's show, Maxine gets protected, protest before facts, are just two of the stories that we'll be talking about. Some of the stories that we won't get to, but you can read about on Freedomist.com. You can get to Sudan ends Israel boycott laws, signaling reconciliation from our Christian Headlines report. DNA robots could deliver targeted medicines in the body and be built in hours, our Freedom Headlines report. China catching up with the U.S. in AI, warns former Google CEO. That's our editor's choice report. Are just some of the stories that you won't hear on today's show, but you can read about if you go to Freedomist.com. And if you go to Freedomist.com, click on the right-hand corner there where it says Newswatch page, and you can get all of the links, all of the joy, and all of the links are right there for your perusal. As you can see, we've got a number of stories that we're going to be talking about today, featured on the Newswatch report, but not most of them. And I want to mention in passing, by the way, to if you go to Freedomist.com, be sure you click on the Capitalist Manifesto image when you see it. That is that takes you to right here, Amazon.com, where I encourage you to buy. And I did too. I did. Purchase you to encourage you to buy the Capitalist Manifesto: The End of Class Warfare Towards Universal Affluence, written by Ralph Benko and Freedomist editor William R. Collier Jr., with a foreword by futurist George Gilder. With that in mind, let's get to the top stories here. Get this set up here, and here we go. DNC shuts down censure of Maxine Waters over Chauvin jury pressuring. This is our topic report, and this is our top story in terms of traffic so far today, and that's why we're leading off with this story. And the subject here is Maxine Waters litmus test tracker. And the top link that I chose for this report is Democrats nuke censure of Maxine Waters for incitement of violence. This is from the Federalist, a right-leaning website. From Tristan Justice, the excerpt: House Democrats nuked a resolution to censure California Representative Maxine Waters Tuesday after the Los Angeles area congresswoman called for escalation confrontation if the jury in the trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin refuses a guilty verdict. We're looking for a guilty verdict, Waters said over the weekend. And this is the kind of other fallout and feedback that we're getting across the newso-blogosphere. MSNBC's Joy Reid goes to war for Maxine Waters, decries critics as racist. Congresswoman Maxine Waters found herself on Tuesday in need of doubling down on her belief that legal intimidation and tampering — I don't know if I could call this tampering. That's a bit of a stretch. I don't even know if it's legal intimidation, if that qualifies or not. I'm not an expert in the law, but I don't think that I think tampering is a bit probably not exactly what it was. But intimidation, at the very least, whether it was legal or not, was the way of achieving her preferred outcome. So NBC's Joy Reid was happy to both give her that forum and decry that those who disagreed with Waters' comments are basically racist. Let me see if you're...
I'm so sorry that it causes pain, oftentimes with my colleagues. Many times they're in these districts where they're frightened, where they have a lot of racism, where they still haven't moved to the point where they can have a decent conversation about these issues.
These districts that are controlled by Democrats. Remember, all of these black communities, and I'm not downplaying the claims of racism by these folks that live in these black communities. That's not my point at all. What I am pointing out is that these are all communities that are controlled by Democrats. Not even, no Republican could ever get elected in these. So remember that. The Democrats have controlled the police, the operations, the legal structures, everything in these communities for decades. And black communities are still saying, we're still dealing with pretty hardcore racism.
And sometimes it's very difficult for them, but they stood up with me today. They put me up for censure because of my visit to Minneapolis. And my colleagues stood with me, and they voted to table the motion that was put up to censor me because the Republicans love to use me as a target. They raise money on my...
Well, yeah, but you literally target them. You literally call on people to show up in restaurants and thug on them. You literally call for that. So, yeah, they're right in pointing you out. They're right in targeting you. You target them.
My backs.
Don't like the target, don't bring the target.
Waters, that black woman who is so uppity. And more people, many of them
moving through the Congress that could actually take the victory for the family of George Floyd today and sort of put some laws on the books that could actually help to prevent the next George Floyd from dying in the way that he did. Can you talk a little bit about something that now has more momentum because of this verdict? Because it does, if they tried you, but he did try you today. And you made the point that he and his colleagues on the Republican side love to talk about police when they want to use them for their own political purposes.
Yes, that's the nature of factionalism. Factions talk about what fits into their narrative. See, the DNC, the Republicans do this too, but the DNC is always talking as if they're the moral high ground. They don't use politics as a weapon. They don't use issues in political divisive ways to basically just empower their particular side. They don't do that. But then it's probably pointless to point that out. Okay, they're not going to show the Joy Reid comment, so we're moving on. Chauvin defense tries for mistrial when Maxine Waters shares opinion. Turns out Biden has one too. And this is from the Daily Kos. I just wanted to point this out, that the difference between Biden having a comment is that Biden didn't show up at the protests, amongst the protesters, and he didn't say anything near what she said. He didn't call for them to up their aggression, to up their confrontation. Maxine Waters was speaking in a city which, even as she was speaking, was being burned to the ground in part, not entirely, I want to be over the top here, but a city that was being burnt to the ground in part, in businesses, innocent business owners losing their businesses. And in that context, within that climate, she says, up your confrontation. Not a good comparison there, Daily Kos. And Daily Kos is one of the worst offenders. As bad as they are, they're not as bad as Politics USA. That's maybe one of the worst. Maybe the worst. PSS Yamiche Alcindor presses White House to defend Maxine Waters' calls for confrontations. This is from Fox News. This is the token opposition network. Liberal PBS correspondent Yamiche Alcindor pondered why the Biden administration isn't rushing to the defense of Maxine Waters after she called for people to... Well, they actually did. They did. They rushed to the defense, so this is not true. After she called for people to get confrontational if Derek Chauvin isn't convicted of killing George Floyd. But she actually did. And then a few more headlines here. Media jumps in to defend Maxine Waters from Red State. Representative Waters says her words don't matter. In Chauvin case from New York Post, Maxine Waters twists herself into a pretzel over judges' criticism of her confrontational remarks from Red State. And finally, Maxine Waters' bold words echo civil rights, draw criticism from SpectrumLocalNews.com. Well, that was cool. I mean, by cool, I mean horrible. But, not, never mind. I get thoughts in my head, and I'm trying to keep this brief, and I know as soon as I echo a thought and I go with it, it'll be another 5-6 minute rant, so I have to cut them off. So that's what I do. Let's get this next story registered, ready for here. Hold on one second here. Let me get this ready. Police killing of black teen girl wielding gun Wielding knife triggers protest before facts. That's our topic report. And I would prefer, I'm going to call this in the video that you're watching, 15-year-old black teen shot by cops after wielding knife dies. Now, this is another one of these stories where, well, we have a situation that we hear the news, black person killed by cop, let's go riot. That's all it is. And God bless this young girl. I don't know circumstances of whether she, quote unquote, should have been shot or not, whether she was truly threatening the life of others. But let's look into this. This is a subject, Micaiah Bryant, Columbus, Ohio police shooting. Protesters take to streets after police shoot, kill teen holding knife in Columbus, Ohio. That's from YSOC TV. Now, I'm going to read all these headlines first, and then we're going to go back and look a little bit deeper. Body cam video of Columbus police officer shows shots fired to prevent stabbing of another person. That's from Red State, right-leaning, so they have their agenda. This one's, so far, the first one I picked because it was somewhat neutral, and it had, like, kind of both perspectives in one headline. Protests erupt in Ohio after police kill black teenage girl. This is from Yahoo News. Which part of Yahoo News? Which one are you? Let's see. This is really for Reuters. It's really Reuters. Okay, Reuters. Shame on you, Reuters. This is absolutely intending to incite people to violence. This is a form of news terrorism is what this is. This is feeding a narrative that you know will get people to go out and do horrible things. And at this point, there's no excuse because you know the people that go out, there's a percentage of them, a significant enough percentage of them to warrant this being careful how you phrase things that are burning businesses down as a response. Ohio shooting, Columbus police shoot dead black teenage girl. Ohio shooting. Columbus police shoot dead black teenage girl, from BBC UK. Yeah, that's another horrible headline. You're just, no context, nothing at all. Just throw it out there. Police kill a black teen girl. And you know, that you get that emotional appeal to black, not just teen, but girl. And believe you me, it's more shocking when it's a girl than a boy. And I'm not saying whether that's good, bad, or anyways, it just is. And culturally, socially, whatever, it just is. So, and they know that. The people writing these headlines know darn well that they're inciting people to violence at this point. There's really little excuse for these people. Columbus police shot, quote, unarmed, unquote, Micaiah Bryant. And this is from the right. And this is, let's see who you are. You're Breitbart. So that's Breitbart. And the quote is around the unarmed, so that apparently that's the initial claim is that, oh no, unarmed girl, just a shot at an unarmed person. Now on the other side of it, I wanted to highlight this. Columbus cop shouted Blue Lives Matter to neighbors after colleague shot teenage black girl Micaiah Bryant from the Daily Beast. Now if this, I don't know whether this is true or not because this is the Daily Beast and it's pretty far out there. So I'm willing to believe it though, and the tensions being as they are, if the cop did make that comment, this responding to injustice, if in fact the cops shot her justly and then they're being accused of not shooting them unjustly, responding to injustice with injustice is wrong, and a cop shouting Blue Lives Matter to me after a shooting is a fundamental dereliction of duty because you serve all, even the people who hate you. You serve people who hate you. You have to. Otherwise, we can't have police. Fatal police shooting at Ohio hospital caught on officer body cams. That's very, very neutral and invites you to find out more information. So I kind of like that headline. An initial headline before you get the facts. Columbus police shooting. Police shoot, kill teenage girl holding knife in Ohio. And there's another one. Kill teenage girl. At least you didn't say black, because you know black is really going to trigger people, because that's the first question is, well, was she black or was she white? There was I saw something recently where they had they were all mostly white, and they looked like, you know, well-to-do whites doing a march or something. They hear about the news of a teenager getting shot and killed by the police, and they took to one knee and the very religious event that they spontaneously held, and then they went to go march, and then they realized, oh, it's a white guy. Don't worry about the white guy. By the way, somebody made a comment recently saying that white people will, before police reform, if police start shooting white people. They shoot white people all the time. The problem is that the media doesn't carry those stories because that doesn't fill their narrative that they're only shooting black people. Now, I'm not defending the police. I'm not saying that there isn't a problem in policing and police being, the way that I view it, more afraid of black people than they are white people and more likely to shoot them. I don't know whether that's true or not. I'm 90+% certain it probably is. So I do think there's a legitimate issue there. But police shooting white people all the time, and they don't get the coverage because that doesn't fit the narrative. So there you go. That's basically how I wanted to cover this, is essentially covering how the headlines were dealt with. As this story unfolds, we'll probably do more, and we may even look at the video itself and do an analysis, but that's not the purpose of this report. This report really is the initial analysis of the types of headlines that these news outlets are creating right before we know anything at all. And I don't even know if you look at the body cam footage, the degree to which that's going to answer any questions right off the bat, because you can have questions about even if she was wielding a knife and she was swinging a knife, which those are reports, was shooting her the only action. There's debates to be had. There's questions to be had. Was she really shot because she was black? There's a lot of questions to be asked. Who were the people that shot him? Maybe they were black folks themselves. By the way, even if you're black and you're a cop, doesn't mean that you're still not susceptible to the same type of, at the very least, stigmatizations that put more black people at risk than white people in conflicts, if that's true, and I believe that is. So there you have it. Get on to our next story here. Let me clear my throat. Turn off the microphone so you don't have to hear that. You don't want to hear me clear my throat. I like to clear my throat before each report. It's just a thing I do. Apparently, nuclear war is not off the table for U.S. in Ukraine crisis. That's the topic report, and I will call the video, Ukraine nuclear war option not off the table. Now, the way that this is unfolded and worded, it's not necessarily that the U.S. is saying that, oh, no, we would initiate nuclear war, but just that they have the option open because it's possible that the other side, well, let's get to it. How about we get to it? The topic report, the topic that we're covering is Ukraine, Russia, Germany, U.S. tracker. And the top link that I chose is this one. U.S. chiefs issue terrifying nuclear conflict warning, least bad option. This is from Express UK. USS Stratcom outlines that this outcome could be decided upon when certain nations certain nations consider nuclear force as their least bad option. They said, the spectrum of conflict today is neither linear nor predictable. We must account for the possibility of conflict leading to conditions which could very rapidly drive an adversary to consider nuclear use as their least bad option. If Ukraine was not unfolding right now, this could easily be taken as just an intellectual policy position thinking out. But they're not doing that for this reason. They're doing that to send a message to Russia, because there have been reports of Russia moving nuclear weapons into the region, or closer to the region. And the Russians do have tactical nukes, so they're talking about tactical nukes. So you could be talking about theoretically some sort of tactical nuke exchange. I seriously doubt you'll see nuclear exchange, but I do think the United States is at least trying to bluff Russia, whether they mean it or not, and they may, I don't know. But they're at least trying to bluff Russia to not consider nuclear weapons. It's almost, well, if you're going to have a nuclear war, you want to be the one to strike first. So if you think that someone's going to launch a nuclear war on you, you'd want to strike them before they ever start. And that could be the connotation going on here. Certainly, I think well worth paying attention to, even though I don't necessarily believe it'll happen. I think the chance of it happen has escalated a bit based upon these comments. Other headlines from this story, as we try to track what's going on in this threat to so many people and nations, most of all the people of Ukraine, who unfortunately are divided amongst their factional lines, their Ukraine nationalism and Russia nationalism narratives. that make them feel good about murdering their neighbors. Ukraine's Zelensky invites Russia's Vladimir Putin to meet. This is from CNN. Zelensky extended the invitation on Tuesday night during a public address urging Putin to restore a ceasefire in the region where he said millions of lives are at stake. And how? Not even kidding there. A proposal was made to meet at the contact line in order to see and understand the situation as accurately as possible. And then this from Reuters. Ukraine leader signs law to call up reservists for military service. And I wanted to put these headlines right next to each other so you have that contrast. On one hand, Zelensky is inviting Putin to say, "Oh man, we don't have to do this." On the other hand, it's like, "Hey, by the way, but we're getting ready." This is trying to strengthen his hand at the negotiating table. Ukraine's president Vladimir Zelensky has signed a law allowing reservists to be called up for military service without announcing mobilization, his office said on Wednesday. Approved by Parliament late in March, the measure makes it possible to significantly boost the armed forces amid escalation of tensions with Russia in eastern Ukraine. Russia fires cruise missiles in Black Sea and moves dozens of fighter jets to border as Putin, quote, strangles, unquote, Ukraine. This is from The Sun. And the excerpt written by Katie Davis. A new video shows Russian frigate Admiral Essen launching multiple cruise missiles in the Black Sea as Vladimir Putin defies Western demands to ease tensions with Ukraine. It comes as new satellite images show Russia's expanding military line up near Ukraine with Su-30 fighters lined up on a runway. And let's just see. There you see. Let's see the video.
Homeowners, this incredible tip is just for you.
Oh no, we're not gonna. I tell you what, we're gonna go away from you while we get the commercial here. Let's see. Is this over yet? Okay, you skip. Oh, I can skip that. I'll do that. How about we do that, and then we'll put this back. There they go. There's the launch. And the Russians have shared this video, so they made it clear they want Ukraine to see this. So there you go. There's that. Siege of Russia by you. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I skipped this one. This one's an important one, too. Pro-Russia separatists use banned anti-personnel landmines in eastern Ukraine. Whoa, I coughed into the microphone. That's a sin. Let's see. This is from defense blog Dylan Malyasov. Russian-backed separatists mined the residential sector at the village Zaitsevo with an internationally banned anti-personnel landmines, according to TV channel Ukraine reporter Alexander Makov. The reporter shared footage that's showing Russian-made Russian-made POM-2 anti-personnel mines equipped with fuses capable of being activated by the unintentional act of a person. In other words, somebody who's not a non-military combatant. So, spreading that narrative, trying to undermine the moral authority of the Russians. There's no moral authority here, by the way. One way or another, there's no moral authority. Both Ukraine and Russia have significant vested interest in potentially not backing down. Siege of Russia and the quote-unquote West has really no existential reasons to be in support of Ukraine. It's just purely nation-state thuggery at play on all sides. Siege of Russia by U.S. and its allies offers a lesson for China. I thought this was a really, really interesting story because this is from Sputnik News, and this is sending a little narrative signal to the Chinese. You got to be move in our direction a little bit more because the U.S. is the fundamental threat. Look what they're doing here. The U.S. has this is an excerpt from it. The U.S. has rallied its European allies to launch a new diplomatic expulsion campaign and a public opinion crackdown against Russia. In addition to the situation in eastern Ukraine, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's hunger strike in prison. That's being used as again. Everybody's trying to take away the moral authority, but nobody has it. Just so you know, nobody has it. None of these nation states have that moral authority, but that's the game they play. And the U.S. says rally. Okay, there are complex historical reasons for Central and Eastern European countries tilting towards the U.S. and becoming anti-Russian, which are difficult for outsiders to. Okay, there you go. And just a couple more headlines here. We have siege of Russia. Okay, satellite images show Russia massively building up military in the Ukraine border from the Daily Beast. And Angela Merkel news from Express UK. Germany will press ahead with pipeline. We've decided that's the pipeline between them and Russia. Just worth noting. All right, get to this next report here. Biden and Dems for DNC-controlled D.C. to become state. This is a topic report, and could put titled as Dems push for D.C. statehood amidst constitutional challenges. Biden administration, and let's see, our topic here I'm covering is Biden DNC support D.C. statehood, and the first link that I've chosen is Biden administration backs D.C. statehood, urges swift action as House to vote on bill, from CNBC. The Biden administration on Tuesday formally threw its support behind a long-shot bid from Democrats to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state. Congress should, quote, provide for a swift and orderly transition to statehood, unquote, for more than 700,000 Washington residents who do not have full voting representation in the House and Senate. And if you want to preserve any semblance of a republic, nor should they ever. If you have this landmass centered around this capital, that landmass is going to have an inordinate influence on national politics, and it will get favors from it's a bad thing. It's a really bad thing. But if you're a Democrat, you're for it, and the only reason you're for it is because you don't care about the republic. You just care about your personal factional power, and factional power will be greatly increased in D.C. where. Well, let's look at the headlines here. White House formally declares its support for D.C. statehood, from politicsusa.com. Oh, here you're going to have a nice, just a nice normal title, because, you know, you want to, in this sense, you want to make this Politics USA one of the worst sites out there, left or right. So you want to normalize this thing. So you want to use civil language for this type of headline. Why the GOP is so adamantly against D.C. statehood, from MSNBC.com. A new push from House Democrats, which President Joe Biden endorsed Tuesday, has rekindled the debate over whether to admit the District of Columbia to the Union as a 51st state. Not surprisingly, given the potential for 2 new Senate seats at play, feelings about D.C. statehood have divided neatly along partisan lines. Right, and it just shows nobody really cares about anything other than their partisan hackeries. It's all reality of power here, folks. As I keep saying, there's no ethics, there's no morality at play. It's just simply reality of power. I am almost sure, although not quite as sure as I am with the Dems, but I'm almost sure that if D.C. was heavily Republican, the Republicans would be favoring this, and the Democrats would be adamantly opposed to it. And they would use the exact logic that each one is using to combat the other. Grassroots organizations throw support behind statehood for Washington, D.C. WSLITV.com. That's grassroots organizations. It's an grassroots organization. So there's the implication. If you say grassroots, the implication is this is from the people. So therefore, it's legitimized. And if you question it, then you're questioning the people, and it's undemocratic. Republicans bash Washington, D.C. statehood because they can't compete there. Well, of course, this is from Esquire.com in the article of the report. Of course they do, and they can't compete there. And the reason why the Republicans can't compete there is because they're bootstrappers. That's all they do is bootstrappers. And by bootstrappers, I mean when they look at the poors, they say, bootstrap. Pull them up by their bootstraps. Listen, we just give them a hand up, not a handout. And they don't understand that their little hand-up things are pitiful, and they're not going to actually fundamentally change anything. So these people are going to constantly need, people in all poor communities will constantly need the hand-ups, but they don't really want to give them the hand-ups even, and their handouts are insufficient. So even if people in these poor, especially urban communities, whether they're black or white, they have no alternative. well, I mean, they do have an alternative. It's to not vote for either one, but that's another. Within their parameters, as they understand the world, there's only two powers. There's the Democrats and Republicans. They have no reason to vote for the Republicans. The reason Republicans aren't competitive in these districts is because Republicans have never cared about these districts other than a few people. Jack Kemp cared, 1996 presidential candidate. He was basically for aggressively working to give the actual hand up, the amount of millions and billions and whatever of dollars that you actually have to invest in these communities to actually empower them to build communities on their terms and in their way. Other than that, that's far and in between in the Republican Party. President Joe Biden's budget office gives formal support for Washington, D.C. statehood from UPI. And there you go with that. And D.C. Attorney General talks statehood ahead of this week's House vote from WAMU 88.5. And then finally we have this headline: GOP Rep Nancy Mace offers faulty reasoning to deny D.C. statehood left. And that basically, on which one of the left are you? Your talking points memo. So faulty as in we don't agree with it. And yeah, it's unconstitutional. Maybe it's not. I don't know. I think if it's not, I think it is probably unconstitutional. I have to look into it a lot more detail to give you my final opinion on that. But on the surface, I'm pretty sure it is. But I'm open to being proven wrong there. But whether it's not or it isn't, it's a horrible idea to have this district become a state. It will be, I don't know, a lot of Republican states are going to look at this. Just all the more reason not to really have faith in the federal government in the first place. You're going to have sanctuary states, and the sanctuary states are going to be sanctuarying their citizens from any federal rule whatsoever. I mean, we're heading in that direction, folks. I mean, I don't know whether we'll get there or not. I'm not saying it's inevitable that we will, but we're heading in that direction. U.S.-backed peace deal signed by Trump in danger under Biden. This is our topic report. Is Biden about to undo the Trump-Afghanistan peace plan? Well, maybe. So this is our topic: Afghanistan peace plan, Taliban. So we're tracking a couple of things here, but mostly focusing on the peace plan itself. Suicide bombing in Afghanistan capital as peace meeting delayed. This is from therepublic.com. In Kabul, a suicide bombing in the Afghan capital injured 4 people, the government said, hours before Turkey announced the delay of a conference at which it had been hoped Afghanistan's warring sides would reach a peace pact to end decades of war. And we should check into this a little bit more in detail here. The suicide bomber struck as an Afghan security convoy was passing. The Interior Ministry statement said civilians and security personnel were among the wounded. No one has taken immediate responsibility. Okay, so they're not going to get into this other part, which is basically the Taliban didn't show up. That's why it's been quote-unquote, the meeting has been quote-unquote delayed. Taliban didn't show up. And this is, remember, after Biden was getting all kinds of accolades because, Joe Biden's finally causing peace in Afghanistan. And we're looking into, by the way, a story we covered yesterday, how it's not really trying to end the war in Afghanistan. It's trying to privatize it. That's what they're not going to actually go with Trump's plan of actually removing American power from Afghanistan. They are just going to privatize it. That's the theory, and there's some evidence to suggest that's true. And we're looking into it, and we'll get back to you on that. Afghans fear women and minorities could lose hard-won rights after foreign troop withdrawal. Well, you had the hard-won rights because the American troops were there, but the American troops weren't there for your freedom. They were there for the interest of the corporate nationalists that the American military essentially has served and been serving at least since George Bush came into office, maybe before that. But certainly by the time George Bush the first comes into office, that transition has already been made. It's just taken a couple of decades or so for it to become obvious that was the case. But still, heart goes out to these folks as the U.S. leaves. Whether you want the U.S. to leave or not, you cannot help but feel great pain and anguish at the folks that going to be left behind, especially all the people that so openly supported the U.S. and now, well, there's a big old bullseye on, not just on them, but their own whole families, because in that region, the sins of the fathers fall upon the whole families. U.S. General McKenzie has grave doubts about Taliban's reliability. This is from AlJazeera.com. An excerpt, foreign troop withdrawals have raised concern that Afghanistan could become a fractured state erupting civil war. A top U.S. general said on Tuesday that he had grave doubts about the Taliban's reliability as a negotiating partner as the United States is set to remove all its troops from Afghanistan. And we get this from the Federalist, which is a right-leaning publication, but as partisan publications go, they're more reasonable than many. WAPO runs op-ed by weapons manufacturer board member backing the forever war. By the way, that weapons manufacturer is part of the corporate nationalists. So weapons manufacturers used to be on the side of conservatives, quote-unquote conservative Republicans. Now they're part of the DNC. Hopefully that will give you folks on the quote-unquote left that think you're actually representing leftist values pause. Your movement has been co-opted by the authoritarian right-left in the form of corporate nationalists, and this op-ed really highlights that transition has been completed. The Washington Post ran an opinion editorial arguing in favor of keeping American troops in Afghanistan without disclosing that the author sits on the board for Raytheon, a defense contracting company. Yeah, just leave that part out. Will U.S. exit lead another civil war in Afghanistan? All signs point to yes. This is from globalvillagepace.com, and the excerpt from the withdrawal of U.S. military forces to the arduous first phase of negotiations, and from the intra-Afghan peace talks to the maximalist behavior of Taliban, there lies a bewildering lie and deception. With the least hazardous junction removed, the process of peace was moved to the war-torn country. Let's see where you say about where the conservative Taliban, they're not conservatives, they're something else. Well, I guess in terms of Islamofascism, they're conservative because they wish to conserve Islamofascism. The Taliban and the elected government of Ashraf Ghani held horns to settle the dust of political fragmentation. That's what's coming. Don't worry about that. I mean, well, worry about it, but don't worry about questioning it because it's coming. Taliban attacks rising despite international efforts for peace. Well, this is what you do when you're at the negotiating table. Of course, they're trying to show their power. This isn't a surprise at all. From thenews.com, despite not officially announcing a spring fighting season, the Taliban has increased attacks in various regions of the country, including the strategic area of Kandahar in the south, Balkh in the north, Herat in the west, and Nangarhar in the east. Meanwhile, military and analysts attributed the surge in violence. Attributed the surge in violence by what? Attributed the surge by the Taliban to the group's attempt to, well, there you go, to pressurize the Afghanistan government and to gain leverage in the peace process. Exactly. That's exactly what I said, of course. And then finally we have this opinion. I met a Taliban leader and lost hope for my country from the New York Times. This is from Farhanaz Forotin. As men continue to bicker over the future and control of Afghanistan, I have already lost my home and my country. I worked in Kabul as a television journalist for 12 years and finally left in November after threats to my life. And anybody else is there who should get out too, because the Taliban, they mean absolute. They control through death, like all nation states and all factions do. Even the corporate nationalists, they control through death, because even though the nation states are kind of becoming more and more beholden to them for some, well, not quite a moronic reason, because the same people that control the corporate nationalists also control their people are in the governments. That's why the governments are willing to protect the corporate nationalist interest. And there you go. And we get to our last story here. Biden admin approves pressuring jury ahead of Chauvin trial verdict. Did Joe Biden countenance jury pressure to get mob verdict? That's our topic report, and the topic that we're following is still the Derek Chauvin guilty fallout. And there you see Joe. You see, I mean, that's about as lucid as you're going to get him right there. Pretty lucid, all things considered. And our top link that we're highlighting here is Biden appears to justify pressure on jury in Derek Chauvin trial, and this is from Breitbart there. Let's see, from Joel L. Pollack wrote this excerpt here. President Joe Biden appeared to justify the public pressure placed on the jury in the trial of former Minneapolis, Minnesota police officer Derek Chauvin, who was convicted of murder and manslaughter Tuesday in the death of George Floyd. And then we get this from Newsweek. Jenna Ellis says jury influence to make Derek Chauvin pay for the sins of white people. I don't know whether that's true or not, but certainly, you know, I'm not countenancing people rooting for a jury outcome or a verdict because of how it empowers their faction or whatever narratives that they find themselves embroiled upon. But I would really, really caution conservatives in rushing to judgment of the black community and why it is that the black community might feel such relief that this verdict happened. Whether it was just or not, I'll let you decide. But there has been throughout it's very difficult to deny the long historical pattern which still continues to this day. And I mean, we're quote unquote systemic racism, and I don't mean it in the same way that the DNC deploys that phrase. It's a very invidious phrase the way they use it. But in literal terms, in terms of systems that have de facto racist policies, even if they're not on the books, that exists to me primarily amongst the police and amongst the courts. And those are the dealers of death. Those are the ones that have the power of life and death over human lives. That's why it's so impactful on black communities. And so these black communities, they see this, if you're black and you're on trial, you're much more likely to be convicted. You're much more likely to get stiffer sentences. If you're black and you're pulled over by a cop, you're more likely to get shot by the cop, to have aggression placed upon you by the cop, to have unjust arrest, unjust detainments. And so when they see this, they get some degree of relief that, wow, okay, finally justice. And I don't blame them for feeling this. I mean, I find myself in part, I mean, if Derek Chauvin is not as guilty as maybe he might seem, God have mercy on all of us for being in error, but I find myself unrighteously feeling that I'm kind of glad that he got convicted, just because I don't want other human beings to get hurt, and there would be in the riots. But I'm not supposed to support justice or support injustice, even if it supports the poor. If it's unjust, we're not going to choose the poor over anybody else just because they're poor, just because they're disadvantaged. But I am very, very cautious as far as levying frustrations at the black community at celebrating this verdict. And I would say, if conservatives, if you actually do want to reach black people and convince them that the DNC does not have their best interest, and they don't, going out against the black community, as I've seen some conservatives do, not a good move, and really not a good, merciful move from a Christian perspective either. I'm not saying that you countenance it. You just vehemently go against it. You try to offer some measure of, I understand exactly, I don't understand exactly, but I understand why you would feel this way. But I will tell you that in the interest of all, that justice being preserved and having dispassionate, objective justice is something that serves the interest of all human beings, that are, especially the ones that have the least amount of power, whether it's because of your race or whatever reason. And it's partly because of your race. It's also mostly because of your economic situation. It doesn't serve the interest of we the weak, we the non, as I call them, citadelian, the non-citadelians. It doesn't serve our interest to advocate for anything other than dispassionate justice, even when the verdict might not align with our factional interest. And you can see here, it's not going to be enough. Accountability, but not justice. Sanders, Pelosi, Zuckerberg, and other leaders react to Chauvin verdict. This is from MarketWatch.com. Ocasio-Cortez declares Chauvin guilty verdict not enough. It's not justice. from the blaze. She wants the other cops to face the same level of the same penalties, which, yeah. I mean, maybe they should face some consequences, but yeah, I think she wants them all convicted of murder. Silicon Valley tech leaders react to Derek Chauvin guilty verdict. That's from Patch.com. So we're increasingly having to rely upon our corporate nationalists to give us our approved political opinions, and this just helps that, and it's reinforced here by this headline. Sports World hails Chauvin conviction, but adds more work to do to end racism, by Reuters. This is the same Sports World that has been turning to the funding the BLM. The BLM is whatever you want to call it, and I mean they're self-professed Marxist group, which is fundamentally anti-Bill of Rights, which is the bedrock of America, of the American nation state. So they're secessionists. They're seditionists. Well, they're seditionists at the they're either secessionists at the very least, but really they're seditionists. Really, they're literally calling for the end of the American Constitution just by declaring themselves to be quote unquote Marxist. Now you might not believe in the American Constitution, but when we have our American sports leagues giving millions of dollars to the Black Lives Matter organization, yeah, that's a real problem. Campus presidents, and by the way, the whole Marxism thing, there's so many different Marxisms out there. They're obviously from one of the authoritarian Marxism, but not all Marxisms are the same. I'll just say you don't sound very nuanced. I'll say you don't sound very nuanced if you just label Marxist bad at everybody's feet. Not that I'm a Marxist, I'm not. Even the quote-unquote good Marxism, I don't favor, but I don't view it in the same way that I do authoritarian Marxism. Campus presidents and professors cheer Chauvin verdict, pledge more anti-racism programs, right? More methods of control. We don't want to have free and open societies where we can explore dangerous thoughts. We will define what permissible thought is and use every opportunity to increase our corporate nationalist power over the poors and over the weak. After Derek Chauvin's guilty verdict, Biden calls on Congress to act on police reform. That's from Mother Jones, and I put that in because we'll see if that happens. We'll see. Fat chance, but you never know. And there you have it, folks. There you have it. You have the report for today. This has been your Daily Freedomist show for Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. And I am Paul Gordon Collier, and I encourage you, by the way, to go to Freedomist.com and check out all the stories for yourself. And like I said, go to the Newswatch page, and you can check out all the links there. And when you're done, remember, go read the book that Ralph Benko and the editor of The Freedomist, my identical twin, so there's that, William R. Collier Jr. wrote, called The Capitalist Manifesto. You just click on that link and you go there. The Capitalist Manifesto, The End of Class Warfare Towards Universal Affluence. That's the paperback, which was released January 17th, 2020. As you can see, get it while it's hot. And it's hot, baby. It's hot, it's hot, it's hot. And with that, folks, I bid you adieu, and I'll see you tomorrow, maybe a little bit earlier than today. I hope so. I wanted this today to be a little earlier, but that didn't happen because it took me a lot longer to sort the news today for reasons. It took me an hour longer than usual, so I wanted to do this at 9 a.m. Hopefully I can do this again hopefully I can do the show at 9 a.m. tomorrow, but